guys, this is Rick, and welcome to Spit Take Reviews. Today I'm going to review Iron Claw, and this is a wrestling movie based on the Von Erich families. Now, I was really excited to watch this because I grew up a wrestling fan. My first foray into wrestling was probably when I was about 4 or 5. I remember when I was at this doctor's office and they were playing. I remember it was snowing outside and they were playing Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant on the TV, and they were making a big deal about this, and I didn't understand why they were making a big deal out of this, and I was just watching this just in awe. It was crazy when I was watching this. I didn't know what I was watching at the time. And Hulk Hogan picked up Andre the Giant and body slammed him. And little did I know this happened several times before this, but they acted like at the time, because this was all show, that this was the first time in the history of all time that anybody this big has ever been picked up and body slammed by anybody. But Hulk Hogan was a mammoth of a man. But the Von Erichs is probably one of the greatest wrestling families of all time. And when I was a kid, it was just like these guys in tights, because watching the WWF and somewhat WCW, as a little kid, I was more in the WWF, because WWF had more interesting characters to me, especially going in the 90s, when you had guys like the Big Boss Man and stuff like that. It was just interesting to me as a kid, but as I got older, I got more into personalities, I guess. But I've always been interested in the history of wrestling, because wrestling has such a rich history, and it is very much impossible to go through the history of wrestling and not come across the Von Erichs, because the Von Erichs are very much intertwined with Harley Race and Ric Flair and the Freebirds, and these characters and these groups are in the movie. The NWA, this is all in the movie. And I knew because of all my, reading magazines. I have always watched pro wrestling magazines and watched television shows on wrestling history, and listened to, last couple of years, listened to podcasts, Jim Cornette's podcast, and, old wrestlers, just all different kinds of podcasts out there. I'm not going to sit there and name all these podcasts, but there's all these different podcasts. I've listened to all of them, where wrestlers just talk about good old days and stuff like that. Wrestlers are just such interesting storytellers. Joe Rogan's interviewed Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker. And there's just so many stories out there, and YouTube videos of wrestlers telling stories. And I've always known that the Von Erichs had a tragic story from all my, I guess you could call, studies of wrestling history. But I did not understand the depth of the Von Erichs. When you watch this movie, holy shit, because this movie takes you for an emotional roller coaster. This is more spoiler free, but this movie starts out, Holt McCallany is Fritz Von Erich, and so he's a wrestler in the good old days. I'm not sure what era, I guess probably the 60s, 70s, probably more or less. I'm not sure how far he goes back. but he's wrestling and he's got aspirations to win the NWA World Title, and that's the big title. And he, his family is living out of a camper, and his wife, who is played by Maura Tierney. And Maura Tierney, I've always loved her out of all the different shows she's played over the years. So Fritz von Erich is the father of the Von Erichs family. Doris Von Erich is the mother. Throughout this show, she kind of just follows what Fritz, and she's Doris Von Erich, she kind of just follows along with Fritz. Now, at the beginning of this, you kind of get the impression that she's not so sure about it, but as it goes on through the movie, she always just goes along with what he says. And he's a narcissistic douchebag. That's pretty much what he is in this movie. And you do kind of get the sense of this is a family that loves each other. But still, he's still a narcissist. And, they talk about the Von Erich curse in this. And you get the feeling what the Von Erich curse is, if you know what I mean. But anyways, and I always got the impression growing up that Kerry Von Erich, who was played by Jeremy Allen White, I always thought the impression that Kerry Von Erich was a star, because when you look at the pictures of the Von Erich brothers, Kerry Von Erich sticks out. He is a gorilla of a man. Plus, he was the one that made it to WWF. I did not realize that he had a disability, which you find out in the movie, but I'm not going to go any farther than that. I'm not going to spoil it. But the movie centers mostly around Kevin Von Erich, who is played by Zac Efron, who does a fantastic job. And I will say, I have pretty much followed Zac Efron's career, and Zac Efron, I didn't know Zac Efron was going to be such a great actor, starting with his original movie, or starting with when he started out with High School Musical. Like, I'd never seen High School Musical. I always, for me, it was like High School Musical wasn't going to be my thing. If anybody knows me, I'm not really a big musical guy. But, other than that, I've liked Zac Efron about everything he does. And this is no exception. Zac Efron's great in this. And I really loved his chemistry with his wife and girlfriend Pam in this, played by Lily James. It's such a sweet relationship that they have. And then you also have David Von Erich, played by Harris Dickinson. And he also becomes kind of the golden child. And he does a great job. There's such great acting in this. And then you have Michael Von Erich, played by Stanley Simons. You kind of get the idea that he had other aspirations, but the father was a bit hard on him, because the father's a D-bag. And he got stricken by the curse of the family, of the Von Erich curse. And so there were some appearances by some classic wrestlers played by different people, which I kind of got excited about. I didn't know if the people who played them did them justice, but you had the Sheik, played by Chavo Guerrero Jr. Whatever. But Chavo Guerrero Jr. Is a wrestler, part of the Guerrero family, the famous Guerrero family. You had Bruiser Brody, who, before my time, but I've always watched old matches of Bruiser Brody, and you are in pain when you're watching a Bruiser Brody match. I did like watching Bill Mercer, who's a commentator, played by Michael Harney. I'm watching that. I'm thinking good old JR. Like, that was fun to watch. And then Aaron Dean Eisenberg played Ric Flair. It's kind of odd. I thought he did an okay job delivering the lines. He looked odd trying to look like Ric Flair, but God bless him, he delivered the lines well. I give this 8 out of 10 leg drops. And so, this movie was an emotional roller coaster overall. And I would definitely recommend watching it. It is such a depressing movie, though. But that's what you get into when you're watching a movie about the Von Erichs. That's just what it is. You just gotta understand what you're watching when you're talking about the Von Erichs. But if you're deeply invested in wrestling history, which is such a rich history, it's fun. Like, wrestling history is fun. Wrestling history is interesting. And I definitely recommend watching it. If you love a movie experience and something that has a message to tell, because there is a message in this story. There is a message about family in this story. And there is a message about how you should treat your children. There is a message in what you should tell your children. This is it. Thanks for watching. Please check out our podcast. I'm going to put it in the description. So check the description if you're on YouTube. Check the description and you're going to find our podcast. You're going to find our social media. Please check us out. And thanks for watching. Peace out.